And today, we're going to have them update us on that, what they've been doing and their role in the community. When I say community, I mean the state of Washington. And we're going to hear from Susan Champlain. I'll tell you a little bit about her. She's the Director of State and Local Government Operations for the Boeing Company. She's responsible for representing the company's interests with local, state, and federal elected officials in the Northwest. She focuses on tax, environmental, international trade, and competitiveness issues. I'll tell you a little bit about her background. From 2008 to 2010, she served as Vice President of the Seattle office of Hill & Moulton, which is a worldwide public relations firm. There she advised clients seeking to impact public policy in the Northwest. From 2000 to 2008, she served in policy and state and local government relation roles for the Boeing Company in Seattle. She developed company positions on public policy and represented the company in Olympia. She joined Boeing in 1999 as manager of legislative affairs in Washington, D.C. She served in that role until 2002, lobbying members of Congress on international trade issues, including China, PNTR.
Permanent normal trade relations.
Oh, okay. Permanent normal trade relations. Okay. Prior to joining Boeing, she worked for 6 years as a legislative aide on Capitol Hill, focusing on international trade and defense policy. She holds a BA in International Studies from University of Washington and a Master's in International Affairs from George Washington University. And her and her husband and their daughter live in Issaquah. So let's hear what's going on in Boeing and how it may affect our area. Welcome, Susan Champlain.
Thank you, Larry. I appreciate that. And thank you for having me. We are making a concerted effort at the Boeing Company to go around and speak to groups like yours to tell our positive story, because as those of you in politics or business know, the media isn't always friendly. So we like to get out there and tell folks our story from our perspective. So thank you for giving me the time. And I just want to start by saying I think Rotary is an amazing organization, and I know every single one of you in this room is dedicated to giving back to the community. And we at Boeing appreciate that. We appreciate everything you do here in Lacey and the South Sound. So thank you. All right, now let's see if I can figure out how to advance the slide. There we go. All right. So as I said, we're just going to talk a little bit about the Boeing Company today, about our future here in the state of Washington, what we do today in the state of Washington, and our future. So in July, we celebrated our 100th anniversary, our centennial. 100 years ago, Bill Boeing founded the company on the shores of Lake Washington, and this is a photo of that iconic red barn, which they have now picked up and moved to East Marginal Way in Seattle, and it's now the Museum of Flight. But that's where it all began, right there on Lake Washington. So that same year, the company came out with its first airplane, the B&W, named after Bill Boeing and Conrad Westerfelt, the founders of the company. It was made out of wood, wire, and some other, non-high-tech materials. And they tried to sell 2 of them to the United States Navy, and the Navy said no thanks. So they sold them to a flying school in New Zealand. So that was the company's first international sale in its first year. And we've gone a long way since then. So the next year, in 1917, World War I, the Navy ordered 50 of these seaplanes called the Model C. And in that same year, 1917, 1 year after the company was started, we gave our first charitable donation to the University of Washington to help them build a wind tunnel, which still stands on the campus at UW today. And we've been giving back to the community ever since. So fast forward after World War I, The economy wasn't doing so well, and there was a glut of airplanes in the market left over from the war. So in order to save the company and the jobs of the people who worked there, we started making furniture and this interesting thing called the sea sled. So, and it worked. You know, we managed to maintain a good number of jobs in Seattle until things turned back around for the aerospace industry. Transfer to World War II. The company built the B-17 and the B-29, the airplanes that arguably won the war for the United States and our allies. This is one of my favorite photos in the whole presentation. This looks like a neighborhood, but it is Boeing Plant 2, where we built those bombers, covered up with chicken wire and other materials to make it look like a neighborhood so that when the Japanese or our enemies flew over, they wouldn't bomb the factory. And then here's another picture of the factory during World War II. You know, while all the men went off to war, the women had to come into the factory to build the airplanes. And they did some amazing things. We've nicknamed them Rosie the Riveter. We in fact have a cafeteria at the Renton plant named Rosie's Cafe after these super cool women. But they went from making 60 airplanes a month to 2 years later, by 1944, they were making 362 airplanes a month. Pretty amazing feat. And most of the people who worked in the factory were women. All right, so after World War II, the company introduced its first commercial airplane, the 707, in 1957. And then a few short years later, 1962, we came out with the 727, a 3-engine airplane, and this is at our Renton factory where we made that, and that plane did better than anyone ever would have expected. We thought we'd sell about 200 of them, and we sold over 1,000. So it had a good run. The 37 was the next airplane the company introduced in 1967, and that is still today the most popular airplane in the world. More 737s have been sold than any other commercial airplane that's ever existed. And we still build them today in Renton. And then the Queen of the Skies, the 747, as you all are familiar with, we had its first flight in 1969, and that's when the company built the Everett facility in order to build a 747. We didn't have any room in Renton or Seattle, so that's when we moved up to Everett, and we still build most of our big airplanes up there today. And then was this sad period of time in 1971 when things went south a little bit, and the company laid off about 60,000 people. So this sign appeared on Highway 99 saying the last person leaving Seattle turn out the lights, because back then Boeing was really the only thing in town, and so when we didn't do well, the entire economy didn't do well. But we came back from that, introduced the 757, which was a very popular airplane, which we built in Renton. And then the 67, which we still make today. And in fact, a version of the 767 that we're building up in Everett is being sold to the United States Air Force as the next refueling tanker. And the 777 was introduced in 1994 up in Everett and is still flying today. And then finally the 787. 2009 was its first flight up in Everett. So that's where we have come from. And this is where we are today. We are, of course, Seahawks fans, and I hope you all are too. That, in fact, is a really cool story. That was the year they won the Super Bowl. And one of our employees in the paint shop said, hey, we have this flight test 747 sitting around. What if we painted it in the Seahawks livery? And so we negotiated with the Seahawks, which we have a relationship with, and they said, yeah, great, let's do it. So we did, and when they had that huge parade in downtown Seattle, we flew over, and so it's pretty fun. But today, Boeing is the world's largest aerospace company, the nation's largest commercial airplane manufacturer, and in the Puget Sound area, we have Boeing Commercial Airplanes headquarters. Boeing Capital Corp, which are our financing arm, is headquartered in Renton, as is our site services group, headquartered in Renton. Those are the folks that run our office buildings, computers, and all that sort of stuff that helps the company run. All right, so this is a photo of our Everett factory. In Everett and Renton combined, the airplanes we build, 70% of them are sold to customers outside of the United States. So that makes Boeing Company the largest exporter in the United States. And for Washington State, aerospace in general, primarily the Boeing Company, but all the companies in the state that do aerospace, make up 60% of the state's total exports. All right, so let's transition now to what we are doing today. So this is a picture of the inside of our Renton factory where we make the 737. It's the only airplane we build there. Today, we build 42 737s a month. About 20 years ago, we were building 20 a month. So we've made significant changes through lean manufacturing to allow us to build that many airplanes. And it's a really smooth running operation. So we are going today from 42 a month. Next year, we're going to make 47 a month in that same small factory in Renton. And then in 2019, we're going to make 57 a month. So we're increasing because there's such huge customer demand for that airplane. And when a customer wants to order a 737 today, we have so many orders in the pipeline, we tell them they might have to wait several years, which, you know, doesn't make them very happy if you want to buy an airplane. So we're trying to build more and more airplanes so we can get them delivered to the customer faster. And it helps us compete with our other folks in the marketplace. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. This is our Everett factory, where we today build the 747, the 767, the tanker, the 787, and the 777, and its future home to our new version of the 777 called the 777X. And that is a city in and of itself. There are about 40,000 people who work in our Everett facility. We have our own fire department. So it's a pretty huge place, and if you haven't been there, I encourage you to come and visit. So this is a picture of the Everett site about 20 years ago. And this is what it looks like today. So we've added on and added on and added on to that factory to keep churning out our wide-body airplanes. And that big building in the back is the new Composite Wing Center. And I'll talk to you a little bit about that later. But it's a giant new building that we just finished constructing. Okay, so the market for commercial airplanes is what I'm going to talk about next. So every year, our folks put out what they call the current market outlook. It's a projection of what they think based on the economy and what's going on in the world. How many airplanes airlines will need over the next 20 years. So that the most recent one says that 39,000 or over 39,000 new airplanes will be needed by airlines around the world with a value of about $6 billion. And if we at Boeing, of course, would like to sell as many of those airplanes as we can, but we have some competitors, so obviously we're not going to do all those, but we would like to. And you can see how they divide up. The 737 is the green bar, the single aisle airplanes. That's the bulk of the actual airplanes themselves, but then the wide body airplanes cost more, so they have more value. Okay? And this is another look at that, but also to show you our backlog. So today we have a backlog of almost 6,000 airplanes, $417 billion worth of airplanes that customers have ordered and we have yet to build. So that's a lot of years of work we still have, even if we don't, God forbid, but even if we don't get any more orders, we have that many airplanes still to build here in the Seattle area. And this is a picture of the backlog of airplanes, not just ours, but Airbus's, and how we stack up against our main competitor, which is based in Europe. So red is Airbus and blue is Boeing. So you can see today for the single aisle 737 size airplane, Airbus is ahead of us in the orders race. We're ahead of them in the larger wide body airplanes, so that's the 777, 67, 47, 787. And total backlog, they are beating us 54%. to 46%. So we've got a lot of work to do to make ourselves more competitive and sell more airplanes in the market.
Is that based upon taxes that they're beating us?
Well, there are a lot of reasons. Our CEO, Ray Conner, likes to say they have a very good product now. You know, it took them a while, but they are a very good competitor as far as their products go. Pricing right now is a challenge for us. Airbus is selling airplanes at lower prices than we're able to because of our cost structure. And as you may have seen last week or 2 weeks ago in the news, the World Trade Organization just ruled that the EU is illegally subsidizing Airbus. So we're hoping that someday, there'll be a long appeals process. It's already been going on for about 10 years. That someday Airbus will stop being subsidized by the European governments. And the way it works is countries in the EU loan Airbus money for airplane development. So when they want to develop a brand new airplane, like the most recent one, the A350, that's funded by the European governments instead of by Airbus itself. And Airbus only has to pay that loan back if they actually make money on that airplane. So you can imagine it gives them a lot of birth to put out new products that are very competitive. And as we were just talking about, it's a very competitive marketplace right now for commercial airplanes. So not only is it Boeing versus Airbus, as we just discussed, but in the middle of the slide, down at the bottom, we show some emerging competitors. So today, both Brazil and Canada have airplanes they are producing that compete with a 737 size airplane. And China has one that it's in production right now. They're doing flight tests and they need to certify it still. But those are folks trying to come into the market because, as you saw, it's a huge market. So two of those companies were building smaller airplanes, some of those regional jets you might fly around on, but now they're trying to get into the 737 size airplane market, and they're having some success. So that's one more reason why we need to continue to make ourselves more and more competitive. And this is an overview of what airlines around the world are saying. And the Wall Street Journal headline at the top tells it all. Airlines need to lower their prices, and in order to do that, they need to be able to buy airplanes at lower prices. So they're putting pressure on the manufacturers to do that. And the entire industry is having some difficulty these days. So this just gives kind of an overview of some of the other companies out there and what they're going through to be more competitive, to reduce workforce, reduce costs in order to save money and be able to sell airplanes at a lower price. All right, so now that we've gotten all that out of the way, I'm going to talk to you about something that you're probably hearing a lot and have been for the past few years in the news about Boeing, where we are in the state, and the aerospace tax incentives that the state has in place. So, first, despite all the rumors you hear, and despite the fact that yes, indeed, we have been reducing our employment level over the past few years, we are still by far the state's largest employer. And this slide shows some of the other iconic companies in the Northwest and where we stack up against them. The dark blue bar is employees in the state of Washington, and the light blue bar is worldwide employment. So you can see at Boeing, about half of our entire worldwide workforce is right here in Washington state. That's not true for any of the other major companies on the chart or in the Seattle area. So we're pretty proud of that. And not only do we have a lot of jobs here, but they are really good jobs. So Boeing average pay is about $90,000 a year. That's from last year, 2014. The state's average pay is $55,000 a year. So we have really good jobs, family wage jobs that pay well. And another great thing about the jobs at Boeing is, unlike some of these other high-tech companies, you don't have to have a bachelor's degree or a master's degree to come and get a great family wage job at the Boeing company. In fact, we're starting to hire kids straight out of high school that have the right kind of skills, and we want to do more of that. Bring kids in who have a little bit of training and start them out on a path to success at the Boeing company. And once you are employed at the Boeing company, the company will pay for you to go back and get a degree. And a lot of folks have done that, including our CEO, Ray Connor, has done that. All right, so as I mentioned, we are doing everything we can to lower our cost structure to remain competitive. So we're improving first-time quality, meaning when we deliver an airplane, we want it to be perfect. And we're working really hard at making sure that happens. We're reducing waste in the factory. We're implementing changes. We're asking our suppliers to lower their costs to us so that we can incorporate their parts for lower costs into our airplanes. We are doing things like attrition, where folks go out the door to retire or get new jobs and we're not replacing them. We're managing our overtime. There were some stories in the news a few weeks ago about that. And we have been doing what we call buyouts, or what the media calls voluntary layoffs, which people are happy about. In fact, we have an aging workforce, so a lot of folks are only a year or two away from retirement. So we're offering them a voluntary layoff or a buyout to leave a little early and get a nice package, and people are actually thrilled. I know a few people have done it, and they say, well, I was going to retire a year from now anyway, so now I get to leave early and move on with my life, and things are good. So that's going well. And then only as a last resort are we going to do involuntary layoffs, and that depends entirely on some things that are happening in the market and what happens with our sales. So, and as I said earlier, we have about half of the company's workforce here in Washington State, even with the job reductions that have happened over the past few years. So we're reducing employment all across the world, not just here. All right, so Olympia, where I spend a lot of my time and where you guys are right down the street. The legislature, so in 2003, when the Boeing company was deciding where to build the 787, then it was called the 7E7, the legislature passed a tax incentive package. And basically what it did is it lowered the manufacturing business and occupation rate. So the manufacturing rate is 0.484%. They lowered it to 0.2904% for aerospace manufacturing. And there were some other parts of the package, but that's the main part of the tax incentive package. And then in 2013, when we were determining where to build the 777X, even though those incentives were scheduled not to expire until 2024, the governor called the legislature back and said, hey, let's make sure those incentives go out until 2040 as a sign of goodwill to the Boeing company. So we'll have something to point to when we say we should build the 777X here. And it worked, and we made a decision to build the 777X in the state of Washington. So that legislation that passed in 2013 had some new and significant clawbacks that were not in the original tax incentive package in 2003. And what we agreed to is we have to build every single 777X for the life of the program, every variant thereof, and the 777X wing in the state of Washington. And we are doing it today. So if we don't build even one wing here in the state, the tax incentives go away. So not only Boeing uses the aerospace tax incentives. In fact, in 2014, over 470 companies use those, and most of those are small suppliers to Boeing and suppliers to Airbus and our other competitors. So it's not just us that's impacted. Earlier this year, because of different legislation that passed, we had to release the benefit we receive from those aerospace tax incentives to the Department of Revenue. And that number was $300 million. So in 2015, the company saved $300 million primarily because of that B&O rate reduction. But we invested in 2015 $13 billion in the state of Washington. So this is our way of showing the tax incentives are working. Yes, the company saved $300 million, and that's what kept us here and has the 777X manufacturing taking place in the state of Washington. And because of that, the company invested $13 billion in the state in 2015. So it's a pretty good return on investment, $300 million versus $13 billion. So here are some key takeaways on the aerospace tax incentives. First, as I said, the numbers prove it. $300 million was saved by the Boeing company, but $13 billion was invested in the state. The more we invest in the state, the more we save, the way the tax incentives are structured. We continue to invest here in the Puget Sound community, and I'll talk a little bit about that. 470 companies use the incentives, and the aerospace incentives are by no means the only tax incentive the state has. They have multiple different tax incentives for different industries all across the state. Okay, so what are we doing next? The 737 MAX is a new version of the 737 in production today in our Renton factory. We have over 3,000 orders on the books, which is great, which means we're going to be building that airplane in our Renton factory for years to come. This is a picture of the grand opening of a new delivery center we built for the 737 at Boeing Field. And the 777X, as we talked about, we're building in Everett and the wing. And this is a picture of the new composite wing center, which was a direct result of those tax incentives passing in 2013. So that building is 1.3 million square feet. It's enormous. We're going to assemble the parts of the 777X wing in there. And it was a $1 billion investment. And while that building was under construction, it employed on any average day somewhere between 1,200 and 1,800 construction workers to build that building. So it gave back to the community in that way too by creating those construction jobs. All right, so now where we get to the part that Rotarians are probably most interested in, what we do in the community. So in 2015, Boeing, its employees and retirees invested $50 million out in the community, and we give to a whole host of organizations. We give in different areas, including education, anywhere from early learning, K through 12, and higher ed. We give to the environmental organizations that do good work in our community. We give to health and human services organizations like Food Lifeline, arts organizations like the Art Museum, and civic organizations that help keep a dialogue going out in the community on public policy issues and other things. Earlier, last month, I guess, not earlier this month, we announced $6 million in grants to education organizations around the state. Big chunks of money to University of Washington, Washington State University, and a lot of it going to K through 12 and early learning organizations as well. So the company cares a lot about education. It's our future. It's the future of the state and the future of the company. If we don't have kids who are well educated, especially in science, technology, engineering, and math, we're not going to have workers. So education matters a lot to us. And our Employees Community Fund, which we are really proud of, has existed for a long time, since 1951. And since that time, our employees have given $600 million to charitable organizations in the Puget Sound area in the state of Washington. They care a lot. And the company pays all the overhead, so every dime an employee donates to the Employees Community Fund goes back out to the community. We also do what not many people know about, humanitarian delivery flights. So we partner with airlines that are taking delivery of a new airplane and nonprofit organizations, and we stuff those airplanes' cargo holds with things like emergency medical supplies. Or a couple years ago, we did one with blankets and stuffed animals and pajamas for kids in countries where they have natural disasters or, some significant problems going on. So it's pretty neat that we've been doing those for a long time. Veterans. We're proud to say that in the state of Washington, we employ 11,000 veterans. That's about 15% of our population, and we're making a concerted effort to hire more. And our future together looks bright. We're going to be here in the state of Washington for a long time. We're going to continue to give back to the community and care about the community. So I think we have a good path forward, and appreciate your time today. But if you're interested, we have a newsletter we're sending out. And if you want to leave me your card, I'll put you on the list, and you can see what we're putting out there in the community. It's news about the company, about what we're doing in the community. So thank you very much. I'm happy to answer questions.
We got a little time?
Yeah.
You said the 737s right now are producing about 32 a month, and you're going to ramp that up to 47 a month?
We're building 42 a month now.
42 a month?
Yep.
And you're saying keep it?
47 next year. Yep.
How many more jobs is that to increase production, or are you producing more from more automation and things like that?
We're producing more primarily through lean manufacturing. Our smart folks in the factory come up with brilliant ideas on how we could do things better, and that's the bulk of it. And we are automating parts of it, but that's not taking away jobs. But we're probably not going to add a ton of jobs either. It's just getting more efficient. Yeah.
What is with this number 7 from the very beginning of all models? I'm just curious.
That's an excellent question. I should know the answer to, and I'm embarrassed to say I don't.
Answering the questions today.
Yeah.
Do you predict that if there's more breakup of the European Union that you will be more competitive with Airbus?
Well, first I'd say we are competitive there. But last year we had more orders than they did. More deliveries than they did. You mean with Brexit?
Yeah, because I just was in Europe and I flew on several airplanes, and they were all Airbus.
Yeah.
Which was kind of upsetting.
Well, some of our big customers are in Europe, though. Air France buys 777s. Lufthansa is a good customer. So I don't know if that has an impact or not. Yeah, in the back.
Recently had an opportunity to go to China, and I flew on a 787. What a wonderful airplane, and congratulate Boeing on that. My question is, on a 787, you build it at 2 locations. Is there any difference in production costs in those 2 areas?
So we build 7 a month in our Everett factory, and I think 5 a month in our Charleston, South Carolina factory. That's right. And I don't have an answer to your question. Yeah.
Last question then?
What is Boeing doing about the space program? I know they've got a space program, and how does that affect our state?
We do. Most of what we do is outside of the state of Washington, primarily in Florida and Texas. But we're a big player in it, yes.
Thank you. Want to do last
Oh,
question?
yeah, the Everett plant, that used to be the biggest building in the world. Is that still the case?
By volume.
Yes.
So we have to distinguish it that way, but yes, it is. Yeah. And now we have, the new Composite Wing Center is a separate building technically. Otherwise, 1.3 million square feet added onto that. It's just right next door. All right. Thank you all very much.
As we take this back to the table, but as part of our program is to donate a book to the South Sound Reading Foundation in the name of the speaker for the day. So you get to sign that, and I'll get it to them. Thank you.
What's the name of the book?
Oh, the name of the book,
The Remarkable Benjamin Franklin.
which is probably closer than I ever get to the topic. So.